Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a really interesting stack of sources, all centered around one woman's journey.
Right, finding her place, navigating love, family, all the big stuff.
Exactly. And it's set in the small Maine town, Gideon's Cove. It looks at how she deals with the expectations, the pressures, of a really close-knit community.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look at identity, isn't it?
Yeah.
How much where you come from and the people around you really shape you, and how finding yourself often means, well, pushing back against those expectations.
Absolutely. So the main character we're focusing on is Maggie Beaumont. She owns and cooks at Joe's Diner.
Which sounds like a classic spot.
Totally. The sources paint this picture, red and cream charm, real history. And Maggie, she takes a lot of pride in her cooking, even though she's kind of humble about it, doesn't call herself a chef.
Mm-hmm. And she wants to win that Maine Living Best Breakfast contest.
Yeah, and that feels like it's not just about the food, right? It feels more like this quiet way she's trying to get some validation.
That makes sense, like seeking recognition for the life she has built, even if it's maybe not what everyone else, like her mom perhaps, pictured for her.
Precisely. So our mission here in this deep dive is really to go beyond just, listing events. We want to pull out what these sources tell us about her experiences with love, the impossible crushes, the past heartbreaks, the unexpected connections.
And how all that weaves together with her family stuff and just the unique vibe of small town life. What can her story show us?
Right. What can you take away from it? We'll need some intriguing characters, too. There's a priest, a very silent lobsterman, gossipy neighbors, a really opinionated mother. It's quite a cast.
Definitely reflects the complexity of her world.
Okay, let's jump in. The sources really drop you right into Maggie's world, starting with Gideon's Cove itself. It's not just scenery, it's tied to the sea, lobstering, that whole rhythm.
And in a town like that, where everybody knows everybody,
Yeah.
relationships just feel different, heavier maybe.
Yeah. And Maggie's first romantic focus, at least as the sources lay it out, is Father Tim O'Halloran.
The priest. The kind Irish priest at St. Mary's.
Right. And the sources are clear, obviously. His vows are a massive obstacle, a complete non-starter. But her crush feels very real, almost like an escape.
You see it in the details they provide, like her sister Christy's knowing looks, or how Maggie, who hasn't really been going to church, suddenly starts showing up again, just hoping to see him.
It builds to that spaghetti supper incident.
Oh, yeah. That's quite a scene.
Apparently, maybe a bit too much punch involved. She gets hold of the microphone.
And tells everyone how she feels about Father Tim in front of the whole congregation. The sources really emphasize how deeply mortifying this was for her. Talk about public vulnerability.
Oof. Painful just reading about it. But, despite that awkwardness, Father Tim comes across as trying to be a supportive friend, which is kind of ironic because the way he tries to help is by setting her up with other guys.
Right. There were those attempts with Doug Andrews and Oliver.
The Oliver date. Wasn't that the disastrous bowling one?
That's the one. Ended memorably with him faking a pop hernia just to bail.
Oh my gosh. And then Doug Andrews. The phone date that ends with her being stood up at Jason's Tavern, completely alone.
These stories really underscore the, let's say, unique challenges of dating in Gideon's Cove. Small pool, everyone's watching, everyone thinks they know your business.
And it's right in the middle of all that frustration, feeling stood up and publicly embarrassed, that the past walks back in, which leads to a really unexpected turn.
Skip Parkinson.
Yep. The sources bring him in, high school boyfriend, local baseball hero, got drafted by the Minnesota Twins. You get the sense this was a big deal relationship and it ended badly.
And the timing is just brutal. She's at Jason's Tavern feeling awful about being stood up by Doug, and boom, there's Skip with his very pregnant wife, Annabelle.
It's so uncomfortable, and the sources add this gut punch detail. As Skip and Annabelle are leaving, Maggie overhears him say something really cruel about her being poor white trash.
Ouch, just dredging up all the old insecurities. It really shows how the past isn't past in a town like that. It's right there.
It's right after that really low moment that another character steps up. Malone.
The silent lobsterman. He's been kind of lurking around the edges. The sources mentioned he helped her once before when her bike broke down. A man of few words. Very few words.
Exactly. And suddenly he shows up at the restaurant right when she's reeling from the skipping counter. And he does this quiet but huge thing.
He pretends to be her date.
Yeah. Just steps in, rescues her from that awful moment of feeling exposed and hurt. The sources describe it really effectively.
Then he drives her home. And there's that surprising kiss goodnight on her porch.
Which totally clashes with everything else we know about him, his whole silent, kind of gruff thing. It just adds this whole other layer of complexity.
And that complexity really sets up the next part of her journey, trying to figure out Malone, deal with his silence, and see if there's a real connection there.
Because after that kiss, you'd expect something. Right, a call, a visit. But the sources show Maggie's just left confused. He doesn't call, he doesn't come by the diner like a normal person might.
There's this intense physical moment, yeah, but the core issue, the lack of communication, it's still there. Big time.
He does show up, though, just erratically, unexpectedly, like late at night watching the Red Sox game with her brother Jonah, or just appearing at her apartment.
Still barely talking, though. It makes their connection feel almost hard to define. Not based on conversation, that's for sure.
Then the sources highlight this really pivotal moment. It's connected to her dog, Colonel.
Ah, yeah. The loss of Colonel.
It's presented as just devastating for Maggie, and that's when Malone shows up at her apartment to comfort her.
And this is significant because, as the sources point out, it's one of the few times he actually speaks at length. Or, more than a grunt.
Right. He apologizes for being distant, for his silence, and he asks her to spend the day with him. It's like her grief finally cracks through his shell a bit.
It hints there's more going on under the surface.
So they have this date day. The sources fill it with detail, going out on his lobster boat, the Ugly Ann, then to a Woodsman's Day fair.
Sounds kind of amazing, actually. Climbing, carving contests.
Yeah, and food, cheesecake, lobster bisque. And Maggie, the sources say, she's trying the whole time, trying to get him to open up, even just asking for his first name.
There's physical intimacy, too. On the boat, a real connection seems to be forming.
Paris. And this is the frustrating part the sources emphasize. After this big day, the silence just slams back down. And Maggie realizes she needs more. She can't just do presence and physical stuff. She needs conversation, understanding. She needs to know him.
And this whole push-pull with Malone is happening while she's also dealing with her family and the town gossip. It's a lot.
Her family dynamics are intense, especially her mother, very critical, and her father, who seems pretty passive, at least initially.
Yeah, the mother's disapproval is a constant theme in the sources. Disapproves of the diner, of Maggie being single, always pushing her to find a husband, get a quote-unquote better career.
There are some specific lines quoted that are just, wow, like telling Maggie, your ovaries are shriveling.
Ooh, that's brutal. It's not just nagging, is it? It really speaks to these deep anxieties and the societal pressure cooker of the town.
Totally. And then things get even more complicated when her dad decides, after all these years, to leave her mom.
Right. And the reason comes out they had a shotgun wedding.
Which just reframes everything, doesn't it? Suddenly, Maggie sees her mom's life, her criticisms, maybe a little differently. It gives her perspective on her own choices, too.
And while all that's happening, you've got the small-town rumor mill churning away. The sources make that very clear. Characters like Mrs. Plutarski embody it.
It's not just harmless chatter, either. It has real consequences.
Absolutely. And it directly impacts Maggie and Malone. She overhears this rumor at the Blessing of the Fleet.
That Malone is the father of Chantal's baby and is dodging child support.
And crucially, because Malone is so silent, because they don't talk, Maggie is vulnerable to actually believing it.
Yeah, the lack of communication just leaves this vacuum and the gossip rushes in to fill it. It poisons her trust.
Which leads directly to the breakup. The sources describe this confrontation where Maggie finally lets it all out. The frustration with his silence, the rumors, the fact she doesn't even know his first name.
It's her finding her voice, in a way, but also showing her fear, her lack of trust.
And Malone's reaction, according to the sources, anger. Especially that she didn't trust him enough to ask him about the rumor directly, instead of just believing gossip.
Yeah, it really shows how the communication breakdown hurts both sides, leads to these awful misunderstandings.
But this breakup, as hard as it is, seems to be a turning point for Maggie. It pushes her towards accepting herself, finding her own footing.
Yeah, the sources show her really starting to embrace her life, deciding she likes the diner, she likes her life, whether other people approve or not.
There's this symbolic clearing out she does, reorganizing her apartment, planning diner t-shirts. It feels like shedding old baggage.
She gets closure elsewhere, too. With Father Tim, she goes to see him, tells him the crush is over, and that she knows he might be leaving the priesthood, the whole Father Shea situation.
And his reaction's confusion, right? Like, her crush had nothing to do with his own crisis of faith.
Exactly. It shows his struggles were his own, separate from her feelings, which is maybe another kind of release for her.
And the Chantal baby rumor gets cleared up, too.
Right. Her brother Jonah admits he's the father, huge relief for Maggie, and she can reconcile with Chantal.
She even confronts the past with Skip Parkinson. Goes to his car dealership.
Yeah, the sources frame that as her really getting closure on that whole high school thing, seeing clearly that he wasn't right for her, never really was, putting it to bed.
So all these threads start coming together,
Ah.
which leads to that final scene described in the sources, outside the church rectory.
Maggie's just returning something for her sister, Christy, and she finds Malone waiting there.
But he's not alone this time. He's got his daughter, Emery, who Maggie has seen him with before,
Yeah, her.
and they have a puppy.
A puppy. And Emery just pipes up, suggests breakfast at Joe's, kind of breaks the ice perfectly.
It bridges that gap through the simple reality of his life, his daughter being there.
And Malone's actions here, as the sources describe them, they say so much without needing a long speech. He puts his arm around Maggie in front of his daughter.
Publicly claiming that connection.
He says Joe's has the best breakfast, validating her work, her place. And he reminds her she owes him pie from their date day.
Referencing their shared past, implying a future.
Yeah, and they walk into the diner together. Her space, it feels like. Not just getting back together, but maybe starting something new. Something potentially more open, more communicative, grounded in who they really are.
So if we pull back from the story itself,
Yeah.
what are the big takeaways from this deep dive into Maggie's world? It really feels like a journey from, seeking approval from outside
Right, feeling defined by what her mom thinks or by past failures.
to really finding her own happiness, her own voice right there in Gideon's Cove.
Definitely. And the importance of communication just screams out, doesn't it? Or maybe the consequences of not communicating. How silence lets misunderstandings and rumors fester.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And her story shows how tough it can be to stand up for yourself, for your choices, especially when everyone around you has an opinion.
Yeah.
But also how rewarding it can be in the end.
And there's also that insight about understanding people, right? Like her mom or Malone. Sometimes that understanding only comes after things get really difficult or you see things from a new angle, seeing the complexity.
Yeah. Maggie's story in Gideon's Cove kind of reminds you that even in familiar places, with people you think you know inside out, there are always deeper layers. There's always potential for growth, for connection, if you actually look closer. It makes you think about the dynamics in your own world, doesn't it?
It really does.
And that final detail, Malone showing up with Emery, sure, but also with the puppy. Thinking about Colonel, how devastated Maggie was, how you said she needed another dog, and Malone was there for her then. What does that puppy symbolize? Feels like more than just a dog, right? It feels like potential, comfort, a new beginning, maybe. A very tangible symbol of a shared future, offered openly this time. Something hopeful.